Greetings to you all. I am Sheila from the WGEI Secretariat. Maxwell and Emmanuel send their regards. We would like to thank AFROSAI-E for the opportunity to share with members the activities of WGEI in the last few months. I would like to share with you our work plan, the AI Auditor Toolkit that we have recently finalized, the research paper on the impact of COVID-19 that we have recently published, and briefly touch on the activities that we plan to undertake in the future. As regards our work plan, we concluded the work plan for the period 2017 to 2019, prepared a report which we sent out to you, accompanied by a satisfaction survey requesting for your feedback on our performance. We would like to thank all those that have been able to respond to the satisfaction survey and urge all those that are yet to respond to submit their responses. This will help us improve our performance for the period 2020 to 2022. We would also request you to look at the WGEI work plan for 2020 to 2022 and select activities that you're interested in implementing. This will enable you engage with WGEI more and interact with fellow AI auditors on a wider scale. The next project I want to address you on is the AI Auditor Toolkit. It is a web-based tool that is available in English, French, and Spanish. We are working on the Arabic version. It provides an overview on the extractive industries along the 7-step value chain. In the coming few weeks, we shall send it to you so that you give us your feedback on how user-friendly it is and how relevant it is to you. Please respond when we call upon you. The other project that we have recently concluded is the research paper entitled SAI Audit Considerations to the Impact of COVID-19 on the Extractive Industries Sector. It was a joint project with AFROSAI-E. It was published in the 17th issue of the WGEI newsletter. It is available on the WGEI website and the webpage on the IntoSai community portal. The objective of the paper was to identify key risk areas that have come about as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and to propose audit considerations that sites should take into account as they audit extractive industries going forward. The major impacts of the pandemic identified in the paper were 4: unprecedented fluctuations in commodity prices within the AI sector, suspension of projects, lowering production and shut-in decisions. The third reaction was the decision by investors to cut their exploration and development budgets. And the last one is that some governments opted to delay their licensing rounds, particularly in the oil and gas subsector. Because of these 4 changes, we identified 4 risk areas, that is financial liquidity, business operations, human capital, and the legal environment. And we then identified audit considerations that auditors should take into account. I would like to point out that the focus of the paper is on identifying and assessing risk areas. The audit response will be dependent on the decision of the auditors after identifying the risks. So let us briefly look at these key risk areas. As regards financial liquidity, because there was a shortage of cash due to investor unwillingness to inject capital into the sector, auditees were short of money and they had to come up with a number of responses to deal with this shortfall. So as you go into audit, we urge you to assess how effectively the auditees responded to to the funding shortage both in the short term and the long term, and how this affected the future operations of the entities. You should also find out whether the funding policies have been adjusted or are being adjusted to reflect the current environment, and how all these changes have impacted the credit rating and access to credit of the auditees. As regards business operations, the business operations from the point of production, manufacturing, delivering products, and access by the final consumer have all been affected. And as a result, when you go to audit, you also need to understand that the risk profile of the entities has somewhat been altered. So you should understand and assess whether adjustments have been made to accommodate these changes and disruptions. You should, for instance, find out, has local management been empowered to undertake some of these responsibilities, given the fact that operations were disrupted on a global scale? Have supply chains been decentralized to accommodate the new reality? And you should also determine whether the changes are permanent or temporary, as this affects the risk profile of the entity. And the changed operations have resulted in inflated costs of the inputs that go into producing the final product. You should assess whether these high costs are actually reasonable or they are overinflated and outrageous. Moving on to the risk area of human capital, what is happening in the world right now is that a number of people have been forced to work remotely. And this has affected the operating environment. So you should assess what impact this will have on the future requirements of the auditee. For instance, business premises, do they still have to meet the cost of those when people are actually working from home? Then you should assess the changes in the responsibilities of the employees and whether these changes are suitable. Have auditees been assigned responsibilities that they actually cannot manage? And you should also pay attention to this because it has a bearing on transfer pricing. Auditees that are now working remotely, are they actually reporting the hours that they have actually worked, or are they making up work that they have not actually performed? And the controls that the company has put in place, are they effective to ensure that we are not being cheated? The last risk area is the legal environment. The discussion right now is that a number of auditees and companies are agitating to have the original EI contracts amended because they are raising concerns that they cannot perform the contract as originally envisaged. So as an auditor, you should assess whether these assertions are reasonable and whether indeed these contracts cannot be performed in their state, and if they should be amended, to what extent should they be amended and for how long. So as I conclude on the paper, I would like to urge you and encourage you that these changes that we have experienced in AI should not intimidate you. All we have to do is arm ourselves with useful information such as this paper and a lot of more information out there, and adjust our work methods to effectively deal with these changes. I would like to conclude by informing you briefly that in the future, WGEI wants to undertake a number of its activities on the virtual platform, such as benchmarking and e-learning. So please respond when we call upon you. Thank you very much for listening to me.